Thank you, sir. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Mail for inviting me for this talk. And I also like to thank, we have a very able chair as a Lieutenant General Menon sir here to guide us. So, and Professor Amit has already set the tone, what is going in the border region. So I'm not going to repeat what he has already said, what is happening, what are the infrastructure, how the Chinese are moving, why, how we are responding. So I'm not going to repeat that what the Amit has said, but instead what I'm going to do is what are the motivation, like is my understanding, and then I try to read the Chinese, what are their motivation to trigger this this standoff. And I have titled my presentation today is the three body problem. Interestingly, this is a problem in physics, and it is not that it cannot be resolved, but it can be solved. Putting Newton gravitational law, and then the traditional the three body is like Earth, Moon, and Sun problem. And what I am doing here is I'm trying to put these three body problems in a kind of like putting India, China, and one node that is moving, that is shifting. So it can shift from one to another, maybe sometime Tibet, maybe sometime Pakistan, maybe sometime domestic issues, or maybe sometime something others. That is the node, the third node is shifting. And interestingly, what this three body problem is one of the novel written by Chinese novelist, a sci-fi novel called The Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin. So now my job here is to put the two nodes a kind of like a stubble, and the other node, the third node, like rotating or revolving within like Tibet, Pakistan, US, domestic issue, and power dilemma. So I'm going to deal each of the nodes separately. And then I would come to what is whether this three body problem is or can analyze the current face off or the past face off, whether it is feasible to do that. So like if we see that what we see the role of Dalai Lama or the Dalai Lama here as a kind of spiritual guru, but what seen by China is totally different. They consider them as a kind of like a very moving factor or separatist movement doing on Indian soil, right? So what they want, they see the Dalai Lama is one of the factor in border problem. And this is the here where, like if you see, the Chinese has solved all the border problems, territorial border problems with all their neighbors, that is 14 neighbors, except two. I think we should say 13, except Bhutan and India. Bhutan, we know that. And now India, why? What is the reason that they haven't solved? The reason, some believe that might, if there is like Tibet lobby is becoming too powerful in India, then the igniting or triggering the border issue can at least can subsidize the Indian movement or Indian sentiment inside India. So it's a kind of like check on India. So if the Dalai Lama issue is alive, then China is also trying to keep the issue burning, the whole set of border problem burning, so that if something happens, then also try to buzz off. Now coming to Pakistan, we have seen, we haven't linked Pakistan directly with the India-China border problems, but we have to kind of rethink that why, if the Pakistan is linked or not. If we see the August 5th notification, then subsequently the articles written by, recently the article was in the news by Wang Sirta of Chinese think tank, that they think that this decision has put China-Pakistan security under threat and their territorial integration also under attack. So there is some kind of linking. And also, we also believe that the Pakistan is one of the factor in India-China stabilization to stabilize the relationship. So now the point is, we don't believe, or we don't like, sometimes we underplay that whether it's the US is there or not. But Chinese believe that in any border triggers now happening between India and China, US is a kind of resident or kind of like they have their individual hand in that trigger. For instance, during the DOKLAM 2017, it was like widely believed and written in China that US is playing. And to justify that statement and that argument that how the United States is engaged, they said, look how much worth of dollar the Indians have bought the weapons from US during the Doklam. So now they are also saying that, and this is also seen as a how India is trying to align with the US. So maybe they want to like a kind of keep a pressure that look, it's not in your good interest that if you want to shift your allegiance to United States, and the Chinese like to have India kind of a strategic autonomy, because a strategic autonomy, they believe that they can a kind of motivate or they can like influence the Indian to move also a little bit nearer to Chinese in future. If the Indians have already aligned with the United States, that will be very difficult to move for Chinese. So they also believe that India is also trying to to join hand with the United States to contain China. So this China is the US is also one of the factors that keep playing in our border problems, maybe indirectly. Now the domestic issues we have seen during the 1962 that the Great Leap Forward was going on in China, and then the Mao thought to divert the attention from the domestic issues to the international issue. So sometimes, and some people also believe that now when the China is grappling or like now they have come out of this COVID, maybe that because they want to shift the attention from the coronavirus to the international virus, to the international situation that is India-China border problem. So they want to deviate from their domestic issue to the international issue. So that keeps shifting. Now, so if, and then last one that I say is that is a power dilemma between India and China. People believe that the security dilemma, but I now think is a power dilemma. Security dilemma ends when the power or the two states acquire the nuclear weapon, because nuclear weapon gives you a kind of a credible deterrence. So that I think, for me, I think it's the moment you acquire the nuclear power, that gives you a kind of deterrence against any other nuclear power, and then you are no longer engaged in a security dilemma, but you move ahead from security dilemma to the power dilemma. Now, what is power dilemma? I would define a little bit later, but let me also try to say that how this happens and how this increases. Now, if we see that both India and China is undergoing a process of power accumulation, because if you see, India is also trying to grab some power, try to accumulate, militarize, to modernize the military, to gain the economic strength, and also trying to get the membership of the coveted organization, that is United Nations Security Council, NSG, and others. Now, so for both India and China are in the process of power accumulation. They haven't like kind of achieved. Of course, China has this political power in terms of UNSC and NSG, but still their military power is not so only second to the United States. Now there exists also a kind of mutual distrust, and whatever happening between India and China, or India and US, or US and China and Pakistan, there is exists a kind of zero-sum game. Now, let me say how that zero-sum and this distrust is there. If you see that whenever something
We lost you. We can't hear you. Can you hear? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Am I audible?
Now you're audible, but we lost you about a minute ago.
Hello?
Yeah, now we can hear you, but we lost you about a minute ago. We can hear you now.
Hello?
We can hear you. Yeah, we can. You're audible, yes.
Okay. So let me go. So now there was a kind of an IDPP, or kind of like central police forces in India. There was a kind of a policy change in India that to recruit more women in these forces. But it was not taken in a good intention by Chinese, and they believe that the Chinese, there is an increasing percentage of women in ITBP are aimed at inciting religious movement in Tibet, as women guards are more suitable to carry infiltration tasks. So they believe that whatever we are doing domestically is have certain ramification on China also. So even the case of women in ITBP was seen in a very negative sense. Now, same thing happens when Indian scholars, they see the color of Brahmaputra river is changing, and they say that China is trying to divert water. Of course, there is a running of water, but it's not always. Sometimes it's also natural phenomena that water gets, water color gets changed. So this whole set of this mistrust present a whole power dilemma. And what is power dilemma here is, in a situation which each state seeks to more power to respond to what it perceives as the growing power of a rival, which in turn, it causes the rival to try to increase its own power, and so on. It's an action-reaction pattern. So now if India wants to be a member of NSG, China puts a hold and then put a condition that even Pakistan should be allowed to be entering into the NSG. Same as when India puts the membership to UNSC, China try to kind of like raise many technical issues, or like try to like bandwagon with other countries to hamper the whole ambition of India to becoming a member. Now, so this, when one state is wary of another state gaining political power by acquiring members in a coveted organization, or maybe by making a strategic partnership. So India here wants to become a member of NSG or UNSC. Here China, for their part, are more interested to maximize their interest by enlarging their partnership. And the partnership means here to try to push the Belt and Road Initiative. And when India objects to the Belt and Road Initiative, for whatever reason, China believes that India is throttling their power to their interest. So there is a kind of like whole set of the power dilemma has been a kind of taken place between India and China. Now, we can also see the power play at DOKLAM, that was like kind of like Professor Anit has already talked about the DOKLAM. So I would not talking about DOKLAM. So because of this power dilemma, there is a zero mutual trust between India and China. And then we can see that NRI, BRI, NSG, UNSC, Quad, Indo-Pacific, all set of issues, and even the India-US. So this whole set of issues is kind of like increasing the mutual distrust between India and China. Now, coming to this face-off is, I would say, it's a tipping point for India and China relationship. And I think it will take another 20 years, or maybe we can say that very confidently, that India and China relationship has back by 20 years by killing the 20 Indian army soldier by China. So we have to again increase, or whatever, it will take time to again reach at the 2020 level before this the class. Now, coming to the point, let me discuss about the crane face-off. Now the 2020 face-off at Galwan, in Galwan Valley, Pangkung Lake, and Nakula. Now there is, as I said, that there are three modes, and that India-China is permanent there, and then mode changes. So now there is some scholars or some there is a thought, maybe I'm not sure whether is true to analyze or not, or whether it's true to the Chinese mind or not. If we see that China is engaged or like in a kind of like crisis where the Hong Kong national security law was enacted in 2020 and passed by NPC in China, then we see the Taiwan. So there is just 36 stratagrams of the Chinese that they say that Wei Wei Chiu Chao, that is besiege Wei to rescue Chao. So what I believe is that China is trying to rescue the Taiwan and Hong Kong because the Chinese are not capable to engage US here in the Hong Kong and Taiwan. So what they are going to do is they are trying to divert the attention from Taiwan to Hong Kong to a little bit at the border issues, because Chinese are confident that US will not engage here whatever happens here. So they are more confident here than engaging or escalating the tension in the South China Sea or in the Taiwan or in the Hong Kong. Now, what happened in Hong Kong? If you see the Hong Kong, recently the NPC, recently held NPC in China has enacted this Hong Kong National Security Law. Earlier, under the one country two system, in the Article 23 of the Hong Kong Basic Law, the Hong Kong has to enact its own national security law. But till date, they have not enacted. But now this law, which had been passed by the NPC, is trying to kind of like, it will be more, like people believe that it will affect free speech and their right to protest. They also, the final law says that to prevent, stop and punish acts in Hong Kong that threaten the national security, including the subversive activity as well as a foreign interference and the terrorism. And we have seen in 2019 that there was a lot of protest happen in Hong Kong. So so Chinese are trying to bring this Hong Kong national security law to kind of like put or pace or to kind of like extradite all this Hong Konger to Beijing if they found to violated the national security law. So people are more concerned about this law because they will be not free to criticize Beijing. So like what happens in Beijing, that if you criticize, then you can be put under the bar. So that's going to happen in Hong Kong. So, and the whole media, international media and the China scholar around the world is more concerned about the Hong Kong than what is happening at India-China border. Same thing if you see it in the corona, during the pandemic, we have seen that Taiwan has raised its voice for greater participation in WHO. So China is, and then we have seen that from India, there is also kind of a supportive voice that Taiwan should be included into the WHO. And then also there was such voices coming from, not from the government, because the government has a very kind of, if you say that maybe no responses on whether it's a Chinese virus or not, but the public and the civil society has written about that this is Chinese virus and all. And we have also seen that lot of lawsuits have been filed against President Xi Jinping in India. So this whole thing has been, I think, worked or pressurized China in some way to kind of raise another front rather than on Corona or or Taiwan or the origin of Chinese. We have seen that some scholars are linking that Indian road and infrastructure building in the area is seen as a Chinese to alter the power equation. But what we have seen is that India is building these roads for last 19 years. So why not earlier and why now? So again, the question is why China is raising this issue now? If we're like threatened by the Indian road and infrastructure, then why did not they do before 2019 or maybe in 2019? Why now? So, and we have also seen that Chinese government, the Indian government has changed FDI rules to prohibit China to invest in India, and then we have also seen the faulty Corona test kits debate in India. Last point is here again in this this crisis is China also sees India is aligning with US to contain China and acting on behest of Washington. So these all factors, I think, has unitedly, I think, has made a Chinese or maybe Chinese strategic thinker to open a different front at border to maybe kind of divert the attention from Taiwan, WHO, Hong Kong, what is happening in India about the origin of coronavirus, Indian support to WHO, or maybe like the lawsuit that are filed, because we have seen that lawsuit filed against Xi Jinping has been, the news has been translated into Chinese and then it was like widely spread in China. I think this has, I think, kind of like raised the a whole set of different narratives, or maybe so, I'm not sure whether it's working, but now whether it's working or not, if we see that, if we see how the India-China border dispute is covered by the international scholar, or how the China scholar around the world, if they are giving attention or not. If we see at the Twitter or anything, that even the op-eds in international newspaper or magazine, the whole all set of articles and the debates is largely by the American scholar who is keeping an eye on South Asia. So there is no involvement of China scholar as such. So if China wanted to divert attention from Hong Kong and Taiwan, WHO to India, I think that have not succeeded, because the China scholarship has not diverted their attention to the India-China border yet. So I think if China had this intention to divert, I think again Beijing has failed to divert the attention, and the attention is still fixed at the Hong Kong and Taiwan. Now, then we come to the point that maybe the Chinese are rattled by the border infrastructure that we are building. And what they have done to us is what we have done to them in DOKLAM. So I think this is the only reason now for us to analyze and contemplate that maybe the infrastructure building has a kind of irritated the Chinese. Now the point here is again comes that how Chinese gets this all kind of information so easily. I know they have satellite imagery, they have like us, they have also satellite imagery and all other things. But now one of the reasons that what I have observed living in China, or also to observing the Chinese social media, is that whatever we are doing is some sort of also is the media. Our media keeps all the sensitive issues on the platform, on the Twitter, and that becomes very easy to collect the data, to scan the data, and then easily feed into the Chinese system. It's too easily than it would have been otherwise. For a moment, for example, let me say that I think Professor Anit has raised, also mentioned this, that Border Road Organization has hired some.
Yeah, I'm afraid that I have to interrupt. You'll have to finish in 30 seconds because
okay,
you've
so
taken a much larger bite than even Amit.
Okay, 2,500 laborers from Jharkhand. Now this this particular news was put on Twitter, and then it was like, and so it goes into the Chinese system Weibo, and then there is a pressure also, Chinese pressure, the public pressure also, that what in China is doing. So I think the Chinese local pressure, Chinese public pressure also works on Chinese government, on a Chinese military to respond to that. So I would end my presentation by saying that we should have little bit careful about putting the sensitive issues and a kind of like triggering the kind of discussion and debate which is sensitive to India and China. Thank you, sir.